Okay, in this video I want to touch back upon subtle mind manipulations of Quackaholics Anonymous. In fact, uh, I was about to say it was going to be my final one on that particular in that particular video series, but I can never be sure of that because I'm always getting fresh ideas and I'm always jotting stuff down whenever I do one of these. Usually, it's after the video is over with that I remember the specific talking points that I really wanted to address and I never got to. But part of the reason that I started the subtle mind manipulation tactics of Quackaholics Anonymous was to shed light on the fact that it is a cult religion. And it seemed like a very obvious thing that's been in front of me all along that I didn't even think about until recently, and I don't know what brought it on, but is the fact that you can never leave it. Not really. I think part of what inspired me to pick this up is because I've seen a lot of newer people online and on message boards, things like that, in social media that are just now getting out of it, that have only been away from it for a couple of weeks or a few weeks, and what a lot of them are feeling and what a lot of them are talking about is the same kind of things that I can remember feeling just as well when I left. I remember. I'm going to say at least the last 4 or 5 years of being in the cult, I knew it was all lies. I knew it was all a crock of bullshit. And yet I didn't really feel like I had a choice as to what to do or where to go. I had read about alternatives online at that time period, but there was no such alternative meetings or anything in my local area. And intellectually, I guess you could say I knew that through all my reading and through all the personal observations I had seen by the behavior of members and and just a lot of other things, that it was all false, that the program didn't help people, that the program didn't save people, and that the program didn't work. And yet I was kind of at a loss as to what to do and how to proceed. It's really kind of amazing now that I've been away from it for a very long time, uh, how the whole idea of having to go to some meeting every night, or the idea that I needed to be around some group of people all the time, even a group of people that was making me miserable, that seems almost like a completely alien concept to me now. In fact, it's one that doesn't even make sense to me. It's almost like it happened to another individual in another life. I mean, I actually am able to enjoy free time today, but I remember around the time I first quit, there was this feeling of, there was almost a terrified feeling of uncertainty because I was pretty convinced on some level that I was going to die drunk, and I was pretty convinced on some level that I was never going to be able to beat my alcohol problems. And I knew, like I said, that AA wasn't really any kind of viable solution. It hadn't helped me at all in a long, long, long time. And the few times I can actually see it now in retrospect, I guess hindsight being 2020 and all of that. But the few times that I had long-term sobriety in AA wasn't because I was doing some magical four-step the right proper way or something like that. It was simply because I quit drinking because I wanted to quit drinking during those time periods. And I picked up drinking because I wanted to pick up drinking. I'm a bit of a believer these days in self-fulfilling prophecies. And AA people would argue that the fact that my drinking got progressively worse from the time I entered the cult, and that things happened to me that had normally never taken place in my life. Like, for instance, before I got to AA, I'd never been arrested. I'd never gotten a DUI. I'd never gotten in trouble with the law. Sadly, I can't say those things these days. AA people would say, well, that's just definite proof of the progressive nature of the illness. And back in those days, being brainwashed like I was and being surrounded by nothing but cult members, I bought into that completely. I said, well, they got to be on to something, because every time I pick up a drink, it gets worse eventually. But I wondered, for when I first quit AA and I continued, I had a really rough time with drunken binges even after it was all over with. But I was wondering on some level if it wasn't happening to me because I had been told continually that that's what was going to happen to me if I hadn't actually made some kind of bizarre manifest destiny. Now that it's been almost over 2 years since I've had a drink, and now that it's been about that long since I've been to an AA meeting, I can honestly say I do believe that it was a result of all that browbeating and brainwashing. Because I haven't actually struggled with a drinking problem since I've left AA, not after I put down the drink for the very last time. Uh, it's been relatively easy. Of course, my spare time and the things I do in my life today are not focused on obsessing about drinking, talking about drinking, associating with people that do nothing but relive the past about drinking, etc., etc., etc. It really, on some level, I was never really sure if it was really true about the, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I totally have no belief in that whatsoever now because I don't think about drinking. Drinking is not a major thing in my life. It's not a major focal point. It's not like I really worry about, will I drink again? Will I not drink again? It's not like, sure, I have fleeting thoughts, but that's, the synopsis of it. Now, of course, AA people will just tell you that you're a dry drunk without a program and you'll drink yourself to death, or they'll try the line of you never really were an alcoholic to begin with. But I did notice when I started making this video, the subject I wanted to talk about is one of the most major cult aspects of AA is the fact that you can never truly leave. If it truly was just a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other to overcome a drinking problem, if somebody came into the rooms and said, something, I haven't had a drink in a long, long time, and I'm feeling a lot better these days, and I don't really feel a need to be in these meetings all the time, and I think I'm going to try to go on and do different things with my life, what kind of reception would they get? I know there's going to be fake AA members out there that say, well, that'll try to say that nobody would really have a problem with that. But let's honestly take an appraisal with that. What do you think would happen if you went to a meeting and said you didn't need meetings anymore? A whole bunch of old minders that have to jump up and talk about all the people that thought they were too smart for the program and thought they could do it on their own. And then they would tack on some horrifying ending that happened to everybody, and you'd hear a few more stories of doom and gloom and misery to those that leave it, and you would hear about how nobody comes back and says it gets better out there, which they don't really seem to think about the fact that if it does get better out here away from them, you would have no desire to go back and tell them anything about it. I mean, the idea of sitting through a meeting right now is just, that's like, I would really have to choose if you told me to pick between being beaten up severely or having to sit through an hour-long meeting, which one I would have to pick, because it's just that intolerable to me now. But having been away from the cult for a very long time, I had forgotten a little bit about how much I struggled with that when I first left. I left with the idea that I was truly on my own, and it was really like a terrifying place to be. Now, the funny part about it, I couldn't actually see the illusion that I was living under at the time, but I was on my own all along. The program was never doing any, well, I don't even like calling it a program. It's not a program. It's a phony freaking cult religion. But it wasn't doing anything for me, and it never had. It never saved me from drinking. It never saved me. It never actually prevented me from drinking either. When I didn't drink, it was because I chose not to drink. I'm not powerless. I never have been. It was all a lie. But it took me a considerable period of time to actually reach that conclusion. I mean, deep down inside, I used to walk around thinking, still in the terms of the cult, that I was always going to be screwed up, that I was always going to be, driven by these weird character defects. I had a lot of fierce denial going on about feeling those feelings, but they were there. They were there even though my rational mind actually told me that they shouldn't be there. Even though I could intellectually sort it all out, I knew that this was nothing but last remaining vestiges of cult religion that I hadn't quite evolved past. It was still there, and it was still kind of a lonely place at first. It's really an amazing... I guess it's an amazing case of irony, really, because actually being alone with just me and my addiction and nothing else for the first time in my whole entire drinking career, I believe is the term they use in there. It's That's what a lot of them do with AA, by the way. They make a career out of it. They don't accomplish anything else. They never do anything else. They just sit in meetings for the rest of their life. But being on my own was probably the greatest thing that could ever happen to me. I mean, it didn't seem so new when I was freshly withdrawing from it. It took actually some time to actually get away from it. But when I was thinking about doing this video, I thought about the time that I was in cognitive behavioral therapy. And I remember around the time that my therapist said, it's going to get close to time for you to, close to time for us to end this. You're going to kind of, we've addressed the issues you wanted to address, and, we've done this, that, and the other. And, this is going to be, the next couple of sessions is going to be kind of a preparation for a patient-doctor separation, which was unusual because, up to that time, all I had ever heard shoved down my throat was, lifelong disease concept, perpetually sick. And, he had said there was even a name for what I can't remember his exact words, but it's where you would become dependent on your therapist or you're on your doctor to solve all your problems. And that, as a matter of fact, he said it was actually kind of it's something very normal. It's something that anybody can become susceptible to. And how he explained it to me is your therapist helps you work through some major issues so you can wrongfully at times, not really wrongfully, I guess I could say, mistakenly transfer the good feelings that you've got from what you've discovered within yourself in therapy onto the therapist. And therefore, you'll look at your doctor or you'll look at your therapist as the solution for your problems, when in truth, all therapy does is help you find a solution for those problems. And so therefore, it's unhealthy to continue a therapy relationship for too long. And so we kind of did a little preparation with each other. We're going to separate. I mean, of course, I had his number. Anytime I needed him, I could call him. But I won't go into the whole entire detail. But it was like three remaining sessions were devoted to plans for the future, how I was going to, handle the triggers, the situations that were bothering me, what I was going to do, the main points of my own, I guess you could say, mental issues that were really driving me, the tools that he had shown me in therapy. But then, it was kind of almost like a sad day, I guess you could say, in one way, that we were going to separate like that. But it was also kind of a good feeling deep down inside because, I was like, well, after 13, 14 sessions here in CBT, it's time to truly move on. Something that was radical for me at that time. In fact, I think it was one of the most instrumental things in helping me deprogramming from being stuck in the cult where you could never graduate, you could never progress, you could never take credit for your own work either. If you really notice in AA, all they do is tell you that you didn't do anything, that God and the program did it for you. It's actually a very telling aspect of cult religion, but it's also very bad for you mentally because you can't take any pride in your own accomplishments and you can't actually see any progress you made because they're teaching you that you didn't make any of those things, that the program did it for you. And so I really began to, that was kind of one of the major factors along the way that helped me kind of get some perspective on what it was like after being trapped in a cult for so long and after being surrounded by that toxic thinking for so long. It was kind of a bit of an eye-opener. It was a way for me to look away from the way I had been actually seeing everything while I was in the cult. Because when you live in an echo chamber with tunnel vision and all you hear and all you see and all you read just reinforces what the cult is teaching you, you really, somewhere along the way I did, you kind of lose an ability to really objectively look at your own mental health issues. You're operating on the premise that you are flawed and that you are imperfect and that you are driven by defects and that you really cannot get well, that you are permanently, completely broken and can never be fixed. I think a little time away from the cult itself was actually the beginning of deprogramming, when I began to get some self-confidence back. When I began to realize that, I'm not this horribly sick and ill and diseased individual that needs to rely on these perverts and these low-life scumbags and these scheming vermin. I was trying to think of another adjective. It kind of gave me, and plus you don't have so much negativity in your life when you're away from them for a long period of time. I really believe that truly a lot of my own just really, really black outlook upon life at all. It was like, you know, just a really, really horrible place to be in mentally, as far as my outlook on the world, on everything. It was all being affected by being surrounded in that toxic environment. As a matter of fact, I think that's one of the most telltale aspects of AA being a cult, is the idea that you can't leave, because if you leave, you'll return to what you did before you got there. But AA doesn't teach you anything to keep you from returning to your addictive behavior. It's merely substituting one addiction for the other. I mean, have you ever seen people early on in the program, or even, well, you even see old timers doing this, where they'll come to a meeting and they'll say, oh, I really needed this meeting today. It's almost like somebody, like I used to do when I'd get off work and I'd turn up a pint of vodka and I'd say, I fucking needed that drink. You know, there's no coping mechanism to look at what your triggers are. There's no coping mechanisms to look at your mental issues and how to overcome them. There's just this constant feeling of surrender and dependence and reliance and all those other words they use, which really breaks your self-confidence to the point that you can never truly, freely, of your own free will, walk away. You know, a lot of AA cult members will say to me, well, you can leave anytime you want. Can you really? Can you really, if you're in an environment that constantly threatens you with horrible outcomes if you do leave, constantly fills your head up full of stories of failed attempts to leave, and tells you stories of deaths and suicides and all of that from people who have left? Do you really have a completely free choice in that matter to leave anytime you want? I could get into a long and drawn out debate about free will and determinism here, but I think that would be far off the subject of this particular video that I'm throwing here. I think that a really honest appraisal of thinking about the fact that you can't leave and that you can't graduate and that you're diseased forever and thus dependent upon them is probably the most telling sign of religious cult that there is. No graduation. You know, AA oftentimes it touts this line that they're all about saving people's lives. And this is serious business. You know, they got to save people's lives. This is all about saving lives. And people like you who are talking against the AA cult, you're causing people to relapse and die. You know, you're killing people, blah, 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 blah. The very fact that they resort to that type of tactic, that type of bullying scare tactic in of itself is an admission right there. It's a religious cult, because if AA was really and truly interested in saving lives, wouldn't they be trying to make people aware that there are other solutions to AA other than AA? You'll see people occasionally say, well, Big Book says this is not the only way to get sober, but do you ever hear anybody in meetings mention alternatives that have actually worked? Do you ever hear anybody in meetings mention medication that actually works? If you do occasionally, you'll always hear a little disclaimer thrown in at the end of the share where they'll say, I know what works for me. What works for me is right here. And everybody nods their heads in affirmations. There's no such thing as free, independent, objective thinking in AA. And that in and of itself, the fact that you have to lose the ability to think critically, logically, and to objectively make your own decisions in of itself, I'd say is 100% proof that it's a religious cult. I guess this is going to be a shorter video than I normally do. About 18 minutes, I guess I've said all I need to say on that one. So I guess I'll see you guys maybe in a week, maybe in a couple of weeks. You never can tell. I'm looking for another job right now. I've gotten tired of this place. So you might be seeing me with more frequency sooner than you think. Until next time.